Thank you so much, Professor Alam. I think we can open it up to some questions from the floor now. So we have a lot of questions. All right. It's just going to be who I look at first, really. Sorry. So yes, I think Dr. Abbas.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm representing Indian Muslims in Australia and networking them. My question is a little bit like this, when we have been grown in India, we never distinguished between Hindu and Muslim and Christians. And what Ahmed promote the culture of nephew and uncles, that's what really practically was adopted by us. We believe in that, we have grown up in that. Even today here, whatever the community is available, they also believe in the same way. But certainly there is a shake has happened to the community. But I want to talk not on the Muslims' perspectives. I want to talk about the Hindu perspectives, which is a quite big population. They are also feeling a lot of disturbances, and they are the concern that communities are dividing, fundamentalism is growing on both the sides. How you visualize that, what will happen in India, because India always has been a secular country, I believe that. Probably it will come back to the clock again, or you think it will increase or decrease? Thank you.
I mean, this trend will continue to be there, actually, even in the future, actually. So this trend, one of this trend will continue, in fact, because there is a very aggressive, Hinduized middle class part of the globalization. They want a strong state, they want a strong nation, they have the imagination of the strongness in a very different kind of indicators. So there are certain constituencies that demands authoritarianisms. So it is not that only Modi, it is basically satisfying that discourse to particular social constituency. And these social constituencies are basically bilingual, and they are the product of the secular educational systems. They want to become fast superpower, in fact. So they want to consume each and everything as so this trend will continue. Now, the larger question is that whether this trend actually poses an existential dilemma for the country. I do not think so, as I said it actually, in fact, because I fundamentally believe, as you also said, is that India has been historically a secular society. Europe has been historically a religious society moved towards secularism. We have been historically a secular society moving towards religious paradigm. That is our and we understand secularism historically in terms of pluralism and the differences in the multiculturalism. So you respect your diversity. So that is why India has an enormous capacity to live with differences. So we do not have, we celebrate the differences actually, But then the whole idea of the Hindu and Muslim, only for the first time in the public sphere, these two words has become far more crucial. Not only that Modi government is basically saying every day Hindu and Muslim, but Indian media is saying Hindu and Muslim every day. And these are the media who are diehard secular. It is not happening on the religious media. It's happening on Times Now. It's happening on Republican channel. It's happening on one of the leading prime TV, which everybody was. They are saying Hindu and Muslim every day. So certainly what has happened is that the visibility has certainly increased. But let us see, and let us admit also that Indian democracy is, after all, is electoral democracy. And in this electoral democracy, one has to mobilize the social forces. And to mobilize the social and the political forces, the caste, creed, religion, ethnicity, race, all are deeply ingrained. So you cannot be free of that. So it is not for the first time that probably you see that there is something which is terribly happening in India. What I am saying is that degree has increased. That's it. But it has always been there. But the society has also tackled these situations. Whenever it has come, but this trend will certainly be there. This will certainly there. Yeah.
I'm trying to look at every.
I don't need a. All right, sure. Hi, Professor. My name is Raj. I'm from DSE Australia. Now, my question is with regards to your comments around identity politics and the positive, spin it brings about in representative democracy. Now, as you might know, Shashi Tharoor, he's recently published a book titled Why I'm a Hindu.
No. I have read it.
Oh, you've read it. Okay. So, and he speaks about how the Hindutva is, a version of Hinduism that's very much driven on a fear basis, whereby they feel like they're victims and therefore they need to, usurp their power. Do you not feel that, the marginalisation of these minorities can have the adverse effect in them perhaps claiming that victim state and therefore feeling that they need to usurp their power in their own ways? Do you not feel that that is a repercussion of identity politics?
No, that is a valid concern, in fact. But if you look at, for example, the RSS discourse and, for example, the Hindutva discourse, their problem is not with the Muslims actually. Their problems are not with the minorities. Their central thesis is that we have been historically colonized because we could not become Muslim. We could not become Muslim. They have this imagination that a religion which was the last revealed could conquer the world and could grow very fast only on the basis of the masculine or masculine strength. Now, Hindus have to adopt that masculine. So it has a critique of its own society. It looks at its own liberal Hinduism as a kind of the very weak, and therefore, this Hindutva has never been comfortable with Gandhi. Therefore, the first target of Hindutva is a kind of the Gandhian liberal Hinduism actually, which it considers as someone very weak, and as long as you will do that, you cannot become a strong nation, in fact. So their dilemma actually comes from there. And therefore their slogan is basically either you Hinduanize the military and militarize the Hindus. That essentially mean, and therefore they have this khaki shorts and the drills, and early morning you basically go, you have to be disciplined and muscular and exercise and this and that, because they imagine. And their problem is that we have to become Semitite. Unless and until we become Semitic, we cannot be very powerful, in fact. And therefore, they are very much in love with the dark side of the history of Europe. And the dark side of the history of Europe is fascism and the Nazism. I mean, in the Indian setting context, Hitler is not problematic. Mein Kampf is everywhere. And everybody is read very normally, in fact. It's not a problematic, because their desire is certainly to become that. Now, that will necessarily result in terms of policy and programs targeting the minorities or the elimination. I do not think so. What is going to happen if they let us hypothetical situation that they got the absolute power? What is likely to happen is that, and which is their target, is that the Muslim visibility in public sphere and other religious minority in public sphere has to be drastically reduced. Beyond that, nothing is going to happen as such. And that's where the problem. And within the religious minorities, they do not have a problem with the Buddhist, they do not have a problem with the Jainist, they do not have a problem with the Sikhs, because they believe these are the people that have come from within India, and therefore they are loyal to the nation. But the two communities, the Christians and the Muslims, or they are understanding Punya Bhumi and Pitra Bhumi, the fatherland and the religious land, while the Muslim religious land is Saudi Arabia and Makkah and Medina, and therefore can never be loyal. The Christians' religious land is also the imaginary, therefore can never be loyal, in fact, since these two come have externally, and therefore they can never be trusted, in fact, but all others. And therefore what you find, it is not the Hindutva problem. I mean, if you look at, for example, India, in fact, we do not have a terminology like Indian Jain. I have never heard. If you heard, I mean, I'm not sure then, but I have never heard Indian Jain. Indian Buddhist, I have never had. Indian Sikh, I have never had. So there is nothing called terminology like Indian Hindu. And this was the liberal discourse. So then the Hindu and India become synonymous. But there is a terminology called Indian Muslims and Indian Christians. But there is nothing called Indian Hindu. But this was the liberal discourse. The only difference is that the soft Hindutva has historically persisted. The hard Hindutva that has come because they have to differentiate, and therefore they have to be a little more aggressive vis-a-vis these two central minority identities. So I do see your point, but I do not see, because at times I see that this liberal fear, which are very much there, but this liberal fear to large extent is also very much misplaced actually. I mean, that's what I see that.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
The lady first.
I wonder if you can extrapolate the domestic insight into a universal theme, which is, I guess, the notion of national identity and how that might be problematic in the current scheme of the world. I guess an example of this discourse in local politics is the proposal that we should rally behind one Australian identity. The problem is we don't know what that is. And it seems that we are being invited to kind of craft a national identity now, and nobody could agree on it. I guess anyone who's done a research on this subject will find a lot of problems about the very notion of crafting a national identity.
Yeah, so then the solution actually lies, let us celebrate all identities as a national identities. Why to seek only one singular national identities? And the government of India has been historically doing the same. It celebrates all identities as a national identities. So we have at a national level, for example, 14 religious holidays. 4 belong to Hindus, 4 belong to Muslims, 2 belong to Christians, okay, 1 belong to Jain, 1 belong to Buddhist, 1 belong to the Sikhs. So let us celebrate all identities. And that's why I'm saying is that we are only accustomed as the plural imagination of a nation, in fact. Is it not necessarily that the nation has to be reflected only in one kind of symbols, or for example, the one kind of language, or for example, one kind, because then the multiculturalism will not work. If the multiculturalism has to work, it has to be multicultural at a national level. It cannot be only at the local level. And the beauty of India is that it maintains the political center with a remarkable cultural diversity. So it has a political unity with a remarkable cultural diversity, which requires a very different kind of the social engineering. We keep accusing the politicians as corrupt most of the time, but they are remarkable social scientists. They know how to deal with the identities, and they have historically done these questions, in fact. So therefore, I would say that this is the problematic part. And then, with for example, the Australian government, by the 2000, ultimately, the state decided to have multiculturalism as a policy, actually. In Indian case, we do not have multiculturalism, any official ideology or any official public, because it is the society that is historically live as a multicultural. So that the state is not in the business, unlike the Australia, in creating a multicultural society. It has been historically, and that is why in the beginning I said that the Muslims have uncomfortable things for the first time, that the Prime Minister Modi is refused on the stage to wear the Muslim cap, which he is not supposed to do that, because after all, he is the Prime Minister for everybody. It becomes problematic for anybody who is carrying a Muslim identity. He or she may be atheist, but by birth he or carrying that identity. But it became, I found that this gesture of Prime Minister Modi was far more problematic for a secular Muslim than for a religious Muslim. Secular Muslim felt far more uncomfortable, who has otherwise nothing to do with the Islam or the religious tradition. But they have this invasion, and they have understanding that their symbols also has a space in the scheme of what is called the Indian nationhood. And for the first time, that's not happening. So that's where the crisis is, actually.
I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So if you could keep them short again, then you I was going to say, please keep them short.
Yeah, sure.
We're running out of time.
I had a few questions to ask about your early part of the speech, but you did cover a lot of things, so I'll just leave them around. But my main question is, with regards to the identity politics and the links with rights, Hindu-Muslim rights in India. I have a proposal, and I would like a comment from you. One is, when you said you deny the fascism of the BJP, does the fascism manifest in a way that the rights are not happening anymore? That's one of the proposals. And the second is, what's the link between the liberalization and the technology impact on the Indian population, that there are more lynchings than riots? As in, if you look at the statistics over the last year, we have 300, 400 people lynched. But if it did happen in one day in a riot, it would have been world news. So I would like to find out what you think about that.
I do not know. With regard to your questions about the liberalization of the technology, if you look at, for example, that early 19th, since the economic reform has taken place, all the data that basically indicate to you that India has become far more unequal society. The inequality both into the rural terms and the income terms in the urban areas tremendously increased. So that is the one indicator that has, and therefore what has happened is that the opportunities for the upward mobility has been blocked for the large number of people, in fact. As a result, then certainly it is in this context certain groups has emerged as other, internal other. Muslims have historically lived as internal other. You see, in any trajectory of nation state, whether it's a secular nation state or any religious nation state, or whether in Europe, minorities have always been historically looked upon as an internal other. I mean, that's a fact of the life, actually. And I fundamentally believe the nation state is essentially a majoritarian phenomena. It will have that. That's how the politically imagined community it is, where the minorities cannot have. The safer ground for India is that the people tend to imagine nation at a state level, so that the state itself become a nation. And therefore, they would like to have a control over the state, linguistic states, tribal states, all other states, to have a share into the national resources. And the second is that to preserve and conserve, promote their own culture and tradition and language through control of the state. So that's the imagining nations, in fact. So as a result, but then the Muslim community and the other, is it because of the liberalization and the lynching cases and the others, yes, the fear has increased. And then what has happened is that the kind of modernization that India and the post-colonial has indulged over the years is that it has tremendously increased the social distances between the communities. So the more modernity this kind of, the more social distances, and therefore the more I would say, for example, mistrust. And that's how the lynching basically comes. Large number, in fact. As regard to the whole question of this Hindu-Muslim conflict is that there is a pattern. The Hindu-Muslim conflict, recurring thing happened large number when the Congress was in power also. It has not happened only when the BJP is in power. In BJP, if you look at ruled states, the Hindu-Muslim rights have been far, far less. We only know 2002 Gujarat. No, it's not because of the fast. It's not because of the disciplining and the policing, in fact. It's also because of the secular politics. And what is the secular politics? It also injects its own fear among the minorities. We are here to protect you against the BJP. We know Muzaffarpur riots. And we know the role of the UP government also. That it also creates terror. It is not only the BJP. And the BJP would like to move from there. So therefore what happened is that both secular or, for example, the right, they are basically competing in the same discourse, an anti-minority, because I would like to the minorities come to me, in fact. That's the dilemma that we are basically facing, in fact, But the other trend which are very much visible is that wherever the Muslim community are economically visible, so the Muslim communities are primarily the urban communities. Wherever they are economically visual, it is prone to the communal rights, whichever is the government. So that's where it has emerged. So this only tells us is that certain the Indian nation building process, right from Jawaharlal Nehru till date, it has built on the anti-Muslim, anti-minority kind of this is very much the part and parcel. It is not only that the BJP has inducted, in fact. It is certainly more in terms of degree. I mean, that's it. That's how you have the historical pattern.
And the last question, again, please keep it short. Yes.
Thank you. I'll make a small comment. The identity politics and the birth of it and the growth of it started from the colonial past, came into the independent India past, present, and probably go into the future. My question is that identity politics has divided the political sphere into caste, creed, religion, anything you name, and there is an identity for it. Isn't this going to end in a bad way? Or we need somebody like the philosophy of the Gandhian philosophy, which is the moralistic philosophy rather than anything else, to bring it together.
I mean, to your answer to your questions, you are looking this social diversity in terms of the source of disunity. I don't look at that way. But if you look at, for example, the Russian Federation, the Soviet federations, if you look at Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, which are not into the business of the caste, creed, and the religion, but it got internally fragmented and ultimately, for example, got divided, in fact. So if within the Indian context, for example, if you have the Russianization, if there is a one ethnic community is going to dominate each and every resources, then it does create a problem, in fact. But that is unlikely to take place in India because it is not only a large community, because sociologically speaking, the majority and the minority ceases to exist in a sense because if you look at in terms of practices, then it becomes a country of minorities. So there is no majority and there is no minority actually. If you look at in terms of the caste numbers, and even the Muslims have the caste, no matter how much they deny actually. Even the Christians have a caste, no matter how much they deny actually. In fact, that's a different discourse, in fact. But everywhere you do find that the caste are basically in minorities everywhere. Since it is the minority, and therefore they do not have any other than to accommodate and negotiate in the public spaces or that's how sometimes it go invisible, sometimes it go visible, and sometimes, for example, it enter into the political arena, in fact, as a kind of the programmatic alliance, in fact. So that's where the puzzle actually comes. And therefore, what you find in India is that at one point of time, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, you have the dominance of the Hindu upper caste. Today, that's not the case. The social compositions of the parliament has changed. You have nobody has imagined that the Dalit women will become a chief ministers of the UP. Nobody would have imagined, But she has a solid 20 to 30% of the constituencies. She would like to bargain with any sort of the political actors, in fact. So you do see that it is the country of basically minorities in terms of not only caste, but let's say, for example, if you're a Bengali, you may be a majority in West Bengal, but you are in minority in all other rest. If you are a Punjabi, you may be majority there, but in all other part of the country, you are basically a minority. So then it also horizontal way you become minority and majority simultaneously everywhere, in fact. But then with the Muslims are not concentrated in the particular area of any India. It is across all parts of India, in fact. Like unlike Punjab ethnicity that they have, and therefore they have a Khalistan party and this and that. But so this is where I believe is that your prescription or your fear, it looks to me that is misplaced in a sense is that this social diversity have basically emerged as a source of strength for the Indian nationhood. That's what I see actually. It is not a problematic in terms of building India as a nation as such. It has strengthened that norms. And that is why we are multicultural. That's what I believe so.
Okay, I'm sure there's a lot more questions, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. So it just remains for me to actually thank Professor
thank you,
Alam,
Devleena.
and to also ask Caroline Valbuena, Principal Delivery Manager from Department of Premier and Cabinet, to present a gift to Professor Alam.
Can I remove this? Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now, Amit Pulat, Executive Director of Affinity Intercultural Foundation, would you please provide the concluding comments?